Okay, I think we can start now. Good afternoon, everyone, to our speakers and the participants, and good morning to some of you. Welcome, everyone, to the talk show on strengthening the discourse on climate change and land use, with a specific focus on health and forest fires during COVID-19. This talk show is part of the week of Indonesia and the Netherlands Education and Research, or we call it WINER. My name is Dinar, and I'll be with you moderating the session for the next 75 minutes. So the overarching theme for the first edition of WINER is achieving the Sustainable Development Goals from knowledge to practice. And this talk show specifically on climate change will address two things. First, how can science inform and enrich policymaking on the issue of climate change? And second, how can science broadly inform society to change perceptions and opinions? So how do we get there? Now, let's take one step back. Let's start with the stats. A recent survey on change.org mentioned that 90% of the respondents, Indonesians, approximately those who are between 20 to 30 years old, they're concerned or very concerned about the impact of climate crisis. So we get hopes here. People are starting to believe that climate change is indeed real. But now that we're in this global pandemic, okay, discussing climate change and COVID-19, in fact, can't be more timely. No matter where we are, our country's leaders are figuring out how to rebuild from the economic and social shocks brought on by this COVID-19 pandemic. And like it or not, it's affecting us all. Although the degree might be different to all of us, we've seen a grim toll of lives lost, unemployment has spiked, economic growth forecasts have been revised downward, and supply chains have been disrupted for quite some time. This pandemic has led to a major crisis, but while we might think that economic and health and climate change is a separate, isolated issue, let's think again. Let's think about what brought us to this in the first place. Let's think about how the way we exploit our forests has been one of the root causes for zoonotic pandemics such as COVID-19. Let's think about how the smoke and haze as a result of forest fires will worsen the impact of COVID-19 on our health. Let's think about how this range of crises have exposed interdependencies across sectors as well as across borders. And finally, let's think about how we can translate science to inform and enrich policy, and how we can and how we should collaborate to build back better. So every member of the society play parts to make it happen. And we've seen some instances when all actors, the scientists, the government, the CSO, private sectors, as well as the media interact and use science to inform policymaking. So that's why we are joined today by a distinguished panel of speakers and discussants from the various backgrounds. First, we're going to hear about how the government can translate and use science to inform their policy making. And we're joined today by the representative who have experience at both the national as well as subnational government. We'll have here with us Professor Dr. Oki Karnarajasa as a Deputy for Earth Science, the Indonesian Institute of Science. And from the subnational perspective, we'll have here with us Professor Dr. Charlie Hitubun as the head of Provincial Research and Development Agency from the West Papua Province. Welcome, Prof. Oki, and also Prof. Charlie. Next, after we hear about the policy experience at the national local government, we'll move on to the scientist, who will talk about the interdisciplinary scientific arguments on land use and forest fires. And we have here with us Karina van der Laan from Utrecht University and Land Sustainability Consultancy, who will discuss deforestation in Kalimantan. Welcome, Karina. And finally, after we hear about the science and the policy making, we're going to have 4 fantastic discussants from the Research Center University, private sector, as well as the media, who are going to share how they use science for advocacy, for innovation, but also equally important, how to communicate science to the public. So we have here with us Professor Dr. Heri Purnomo from the Center for International Forestry Research and PP University, Paul Bergers, PhD, as the founder of social enterprise Gula Gula Food Forest Program, and also some familiar faces, Hans Nicholas Jong, a journalist from Wonga Bay, as well as Mas Iwan Susanto, a member of the Society of Indonesian Environmental Journalists, as well as a journalist from Harian Kompas. Welcome, Prof. Harry, Paul, Hans, and Mas Iwan. A brief note to the participants, you can feel free to drop your questions or comments in the chat section in the Zoom, and then we'll select some questions and discuss with speakers and discussants towards the end of the session. So without further ado, in the interest of time, I'd like to start the first topic on policy making, but before that, we will first hear a recording remarks from Prof. Alan Koropitan as the president of the Young Academy of Science. Prof. Alan, unfortunately, he can't be here with us today as he has another urgent commitment at the moment, but we have recorded his presentation and we will play that to kick off our session. Prof. Alan will overall highlight the importance of science in policy responsiveness, especially on his research on the crucial link between sea and land use observations to strengthen policy responsiveness. So let's welcome Prof. Alan in his recording. Okay, sorry, but I can't seem to hear anything from the video.
What kind of Indonesian that we in Netherlands time, the me of sciences. Let me start my talk from a book called Science 45, Indonesian Science Agenda that published in 2016 by Indonesian Academy of Sciences. Actually, the book was inspired by the Dutch research agenda from Kainawe that summarizes all the key scientific questions. Why is it called Science 45? It is because this agenda has a long-term vision, a collective dreams of Indonesian young scientists as part of our effort to visualize what kind of Indonesian that we imagine in its 100 years independence. So this is the cluster and the question. And I would like to emphasize the question number 27, deciphering the might of the Indonesian maritime continent. And then this is the teaser of the article in the book. And let me start from the big picture is coming from the idea of climatic teleconnection. So it is started from the relatively warm surface water in tropical ocean that will drive convective processes that produce a kind of atmospheric circulation. On the other hand, ocean circulation controls the heat distribution inside the ocean as well as the water mass distribution, including temperature in the surface, and finally drive the atmospheric circulation. And then this is the two phenomena that important in Pacific and Indian Oceans, the ENSO and the dipole mode. For simple explanation, during El Nino, the relatively warm surface water in the eastern Indonesia maritime continent will move to the central Pacific Ocean. Reversely, during La Nina, the warm surface water will move into the IMC. That means El Nino is longer dry season and La Nina is longer rainy season in the IMC, the Indonesian Maritime Continent. The similar thing also happened in the Indian Ocean. Positive dipole mode refer to the El Nino, that means dry season, longer dry season, and negative dipole mode refer to the La Nina event. So we have longer rainy season. So the Indo-Pacific teleconnection, they responsible with the variability and also the dynamics. There is a one interesting question. Is the Indian Ocean a suppressor or an amplifier of ENSO? There are some papers support the amplifier, there are some papers support the suppressor, but Ihara et al. Reported the trend during the last 100 years. The tendencies of the occurrences of positive and negative dipole events in September until November shows three distinct regimes during the period analyzed. During 1880 until 1919, negative dipole mode events associated with La Nina events occur more frequently than positive events. 1920 until 1949, some weak positive events occur relatively independently of El Nino events over the Pacific. 1960 until 2004 is characterized by strong and frequent occurrences of positive events associated with El Nino events. I have one example. There are two strong events of El Nino, 1997 and 2015, and another weak El Nino in 2006. So in 2015, a strong El Nino event had triggered forest fire in Indonesia, as reported by Koplitz et al. The haze in 2015 resulted in 100,300 excess deaths across Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore. That means more than double those of the 2006 event. However, there is one interesting phenomena in 2015 because there is one weak positive, weak negative dipole happen in the peak of El Nino. So this is a kind of strange because the relatively warm surface water dispersed into the maritime continent, the Indonesian maritime continent, and then trigger evaporation. And then rainy season happened during the peak of El Nino event in 2015. Unfortunately, we don't have any information what happened in 1997 compared to the impact of has to human health. And for the future direction, how do we understand the climate dynamics and its interaction with climate change that will continue to occur in the future? Is there any probability of a new mode of climate variability arise from IMC? There is a new trend after 2014, after 2004. And the influence of the climate variability not only in Indonesia, but also in wider areas. In terms of health and forest fire issues, an understanding of the Indo-Pacific climate trends or the teleconnection is indispensable to answer this question. Further research supported by observation and modeling is needed to understand the physical processes and the variability of the climate in the IMC. So I think this is important for our policy in terms of mitigation action. Thank you very much. That's all.
Okay, thank you to Prof. Alan for making the time to record his presentation amidst his tight schedule. From Prof. Alan's presentation, I think we can see how his research on land and sea observations have been carried out to respond policy response. So to further go deeper into that, what's the recipe in using science for policy making? How can the government use and translate science for policy making? And how has it been implemented so far? Let's hear the answers from our first two speakers. I would like to first invite Professor Dr. Oki Karnarajasa, who currently serves as the Deputy Chairman for Earth Science at the Indonesian Institute of Science. Prof. Oki is also a professor of marine microbiology at Diponegoro University of Semarang. He was also the director of research and community service, Ristek Dikti, for several years. He gives a lot of attention and portion on development of science-based policy, along with his commitment to support community service programs based on research output. Prof. Oki, you have approximately 7 to 8 minutes to deliver your presentation, and the Zoom floor is yours. Over to you,
Okay.
Prof.
Thank you so much, Raidiner. Thank you also to the organizing committee for giving me the opportunity. uh, as mentioned by moderator, I will speak from two different perspectives. The first one will be my former role as the Director for Research and Community Services at the Ministry of Research and Technology, and my current service as the Deputy for Earth Sciences at Indonesian Institute of Science. So the Ministry of Research and Technology has policy on research and innovation with the purposes to produce appropriate technology as a solution to the problem in the community. And secondly, to improve the value added and stimulate commercialization to provide import substitution, as well as to increase the local content as well, and also to achieve the frontier technology. So Indonesia has already set the national grand plan for research between 2017 to 2045, dubbed as RIN, that cover 8 different research focuses as you see in the slide. So to implement RIN, every 5 years, the ministry creates national research priority, including the current period of 2020 to 2024. It includes 9 research focuses: research agriculture, new and renewable energy, health and pharmacy, transportation, maritime, defense and security, as well as engineering product, social humanity, art, culture, and education. Last but not least is multidisciplinary and cross-sector issue that includes number 1, disaster, number 2, climate change, number 3, biodiversity, and then water, environment, and stunting nutrition. In addition, the ministry has already set also another that should be achieved between 2020 and 2024. And on the right side, you can see the ministry has also set the 12 super priority of national innovation product out of 49 product. Next slide, please. Now, from LIPI perspective, the beauty of earth sciences at the Indonesian Institute of Sciences conduct research encompassing oceanography, marine bioindustry, deep sea limnology, and geotechnology. Researches related to climate change have been conducted with the goal to advance our knowledge on the state of climate change in Indonesia, and also for helping the of adaptation strategies and identification of climate change mitigation capacity that in the long run that will cater to the policymaker and stakeholder needs. We assess the state of climate change in Indonesia from land to sea, even to the depth of ocean floor, using paleoclimate archive, observational data, and modeling studies. Our researchers at the different research centers within LIPI use a suite of archives including lake sediment, reef building coral, and deep sea sediment to reconstruct past climatic parameters such as past temperature, rainfall, and ocean pH. In the land, on the other hand, we stimulate riverine floods with changing climate, and at the sea, we have several buoys that in place to understand the role of Indonesian through flow on the Indo-Pacific climate. The scientific information on the state of climates help to formulate adaptation strategies such as how communities could better adapt to flooding event, how vulnerable our coral reef with our warming sea, and the tourism industry in small island that could adapt against the rising sea. Being a large maritime nation, I think we also conduct research on the capability of our ocean to absorb greenhouse gas. Coastal ecosystems such as seagrass and mangrove provide co-benefit in light of climate change. They have the ability to absorb atmospheric greenhouse, thus climate change mitigation and their conservation provide ecosystem services that will help us adapt to climate change. For example, seagrass has the capability to regulate ocean pH and also mangrove that can protect coastal communities to extreme wave events that are projected to increase under climate change. Next slide, please. As I have mentioned, ultimately, our scientific knowledge should contribute to policymaker and society. We translate science to policymaker both in the local and international sphere. For example, our flood simulation under climate change in Batanghari River in Jambi Province by Research Center for Limnology have been communicated to the local government. We also intend the impact of peat forest fire in the mid and downstream area. Our researchers at Research Center for Oceanography, on the other hand, have been contributing as a lead author for the upcoming SIG assessment report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC, on issues related to the ocean and ocean acidification. We also strive to provide practical solution in the field to help stakeholders assess their blue carbon potential for seagrass ecosystem. The Research Center of Oceanography has set up an online calculator based on our publication. This effort is in line with our national agenda to identify ocean for climate change mitigation.
Prof, okay, sorry, you have 1 minute left. Thank
Okay,
you.
for our nationally determined contribution to the Paris Agreement. We are also installing a real-time coastal monitoring for seeing changes in ocean temperature, salinity, as well as chemical parameters such as oxygen and pH. The real-time system, when placed in area of important to bioindustry, such as in Lombok, where our Marine Center for Bioindustry is located, would help communities to detect sudden changes in the ocean that could kill their future harvest, as well as to inform marine park in the potential of coral bleaching. In the long term, the data would contribute to generating the needed marine climate data. Indeed, this effort is part of Indonesian commitment to SDGs 14.3, that is life under water, specifically in the global effort to monitoring changes in the ocean pH. In summary, this is our portfolio in climate change research, from land to deep sea, from past to the future, and from science to policymaker and stakeholder. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Great. Thank you so much for the very interesting presentation, Prof. Oki. Now, in the interest of time, we now wanted to get a little deeper into the subnational perspective on how the province applies science and policies. And I would like to invite Professor Dr. Charlie Hitubun, the head of the Research and Development Agency, Balitbangda of West Papua Province. Prof. Charlie is also an academician at the Forestry Faculty of the University of Papua, concentrated on forest botany and resources. Prof. Charlie, same as Prof. Oki, you have 7 to 8 minutes, and the Zoom floor is yours.
Uh, Thank you. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. So I would like to share my experience about using science in making policy, especially sustainable development policy in West Papua province, in realizing a conservation province. So next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide. Hello. Next slide.
Yeah.
Could you please?
Great. Riri, could you help the slide, please? Thank you.
Yeah. Could you please back to? Could you please back to back? Second slide. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So as a brief overview for all, West Papua is to province in Papua, which is known to be very rich in natural resource, including its biodiversity and culture. However, these two provinces are the two poorest provinces in Indonesia with the lowest human development index. So central government policy that accelerate development in Tanah Papua by building infrastructure and pursuing economic growth also have consequences for environmental damage. Next slide. Next, please. Yes. Infrastructure development and extension of the oil palm plantation have an impact of forest destruction, so deforestation and also forest degradation, as well as social problems with violation of territories and right of native Papuan peoples. So we can see in the map of the logging and oil palm consumption, almost all productive area in the lowland Tanah Papua has been plotted by a large company whose permit been issued by a government in Jakarta. So yeah, it is quite pity that if we look in the map that almost all area is already plotted. Next. Current research result widely used to make a policy in West Papua, especially initiating West Papua as conservation province, which is nothing but its sustainable development policy in West Papua province, include these two recent and important publications related to biodiversity and climate change. So these two publications give the fact that New Guinea has the richest island flora, and also climate change, it's really threatened biodiversity and culture heritage in Papua. So from this publication, we extract and then try to make a policy to support conservation province policy in Papua. Next slide. Although the data collected is still incomplete and there are still many areas in Tanah Papua that remain unknown, still mysterious. So we can see the area still under collected from natural history data. So data that we combine here actually from very incomplete, but it's already helped to the protected conservation policy in local government. So our experience using scientific data and information with development partners has resulted in milestone for sustainable development in West Papua. Next slide, please. Yeah, milestone for sustainable development in West Papua. So declaration of West Papua as the first conservation province in Indonesia in 2015 and followed by Manokwari Declaration in 2018. In Manokwari Declaration is actually consists of 14 points that a commitment of all stakeholders to protect and preserve minimum 70% of forest cover and 50% sea and coastal area in West Papua. And then it means that increase the protected area that already set up in our current spatial planning document. And also from the Manokwari Declaration, the follow-up is governor or local government, provincial government, we issue a special regulation we call Perdasus number 10, 2018 about sustainable development in West Papua. So this is the basic regulation that is will be the the formal, the legal things that will be basic for all sustainable development in West Papua.
Charlie,
Next
sorry,
slide.
you have 1 minute left.
Yeah,
Thank
next
you.
slide, please. From the result of our publication on climate change, actually, we use result to design a special plan for and this is the adaptive to climate change. Next slide, please. West Papua Province Special Plan is currently being revised to accommodate our commitment from 36.4% to 70% protected area. A special area for protection. Next slide, please. Protection of biodiversity and culture of Indonesian people. This is covering an area about 2.3 million and covering for this. So we call the crown jewel of Tanah Papua. So this is a special zone with function protected area. So and also this is it's a follow-up for the climate change adaptation, mitigation and adaptation for future generation. So I think this is all for my presentation, and then thank you so much to invite me to join this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Charlie, for showing us experiences in how science and research has shaped policies in West Papua in terms of conservation. So in the first session from Prof. Oki and Prof. Charlie, we learned how science is really being used to inform policy. And next, we're going to move on to the scientists to talk about the scientific arguments on land use and forest fires. And I would like to invite Karina van der Laan here. Dr. Karina is an expert on land conversion and land use changes in Indonesia from Utrecht University and Land Sustainability Consultancy. Dr. Karina, over to you.
Yes, thank you. I want to ask if I can share my own screen because I changed my slides. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure, that's fine. Please go ahead.
Great, thanks. Perfect. Thank you also for inviting me. Today I will talk about the Indonesian fires and also the relationship to COVID-19. here you can see in this illustration land use land cover change in Borneo for the past almost 40 years. In the middle, you see still the green heart of Borneo, and around it in the lowlands, you see developments of oil palm plantations and pulpwood plantations. And in gray, you can see the development of infrastructure, but also mining concessions and other land uses for crop production or for food crop cultivation, for example. But also large-scale fires have taken place in Borneo. Here you can see that unfortunately the forest fires also not only result in land use change, land cover change, but also produce big smoke blankets in Borneo. But not only in Borneo, but also in Sumatra. The causes are very broad, mostly everything. There's a lot happening in my screen. The causes are widespread, but mostly the fires are lit by large-scale companies for land clearing and also by small-scale farmers. And the underlying causes are that El Nino causes these fires to expand widely. The problem here is that Kalimantan, but also Sumatra, have large peat deposits in their soils, and also that forest fires occur on a regular basis. And El Nino takes place once every several years, but you see that droughts are increasing, and so the fires expand rapidly. As a result, thick, noxious smoke covered the islands, which is shown on this illustration, and many schools and airports have to close the doors. And this not only counts for Indonesia, but also for the surrounding countries, just like Singapore. Another negative and very important side effect is that millions of people are exposed to smoke and smog, causing respiratory problems. This year, during the COVID-19 pandemic, Indonesia goes through a so-called double crisis. What I mean by this is that the COVID-19 crisis is believed to increase the occurrence of fire, but also that the fires impact people's vulnerability to COVID-19. Various reports state that the risk and severity of infection may increase amongst already vulnerable communities exposed to high levels of air pollution. And especially 4 decades of fire and air pollution have a big impact on this. This needs to be further investigated, but one can expect, though, that this is the case since studies have already shown the relationship between air pollution and the increase in the susceptibility to viral respiratory infection in general. Also, high infection rates have been found in polluted areas. This also has to do with population pressure, but still. At the same time, forest clearance also by fire has spiked at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, which is shown by various satellite imagery. In the first 20 weeks of 2020 in Indonesia, forest loss in Indonesia rose with 50%. And the causes are said to be the reduced presence and capacity of law enforcement on the ground, but also fire prevention measures on the ground have been less than usual. Further, weather conditions and fuel levels such as dry wood and degraded forest and also dry peatlands may be more favorable for further fire occurrence in the next couple of months. As a result, Indonesia may enter in a vicious cycle of forest fires and COVID-19, harming thousands of people who do not have access to good healthcare. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Karina. Thank you to all of our speakers. Again, in the interest of time, now I would like to hear about what our discussants have to say about science. So first is using science for advocacy. How do we use science for advocacy, and what's the role of organizations such as CSO and research organizations on this? And I would like to invite Professor Dr. Heri Purnomo a professor of forest management at the IPB University, as well as a scientist at CIFOR. Prof. Heri, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Mbak Redina. So first, thanks for inviting me to this event. Could you show it my presentation in the view mode, please? So this is using science for advocacy. Next, please. Perhaps I can.
Riri, could you help Prof. Heri, please, here?
So can you, maybe I use my own screen, share my own screen.
Sure, that's fine, Prof. Heri, please go ahead.
Okay. Can't see my, right. Sorry. So this is using science for advocacy. It's myself and also Dia Puspitaloka, who also work at the CIFOR. So first, in the definition of science, science is knowledge covering general truth, obtained and tested through scientific method, theory and data and fact. This is a very classic example of science, journal. And I love to write a journal. It is one of my journal that most cited, one of most cited at the Forest Policy and Economy, talking about fire economy and actor network of forest and land fire in Indonesia. And then what is advocacy? This is advocacy, what I did is activity that aims to influence decision within political and economic and social institutions. I met with Pak Darmin Nasution, Ibu Siti Nurbaya, the Minister of Agriculture, and also Ibu Puan Maharani. So five ministers was there when I launched the one of my work called the Grand Design for Fire Prevention, together with the Bappenas and the coordinating Ministry of Economy. So how to influence the top leader at the national level as well as at the village, at the kabupaten, and also the provincial level. That's advocacy, how to influence them actually. And this is the way, it's very, very key to translate science to advocacy. I'm scientist, so I have to read and produce actually journal articles. It is very common. I'm at CIFOR, you push to do it, you have to do it, and also academic book. And this is the work of scientists. If you ask CIFOR, what is doing science is publish the journal article. That's very simple. And then for advocacy, you have to translate into the common and interesting language, into public, social media campaign, blog, web, news, TV, Twitter, and also invited to public speaking, as well as facilitating the multi-stakeholder fora. Many times I was invited and then to facilitate the discussion between stakeholders. But I have science in my head. And also lobbying and connecting. It's very important.
Of Harris, sorry, you have
Yeah.
1 minute left. Thank you.
And co-delivering that to the politician, policymaker, business person, and community leader. So there's a co-learning between scientists and politicians. And this is, again, this is science journal, I love it. And this example of Forest News. And then this is what to say, and then how to say it. If you're interviewed by Spanish television, for instance, on oil pump of Indonesia, how to say it. That's very key. Also, Compass, yeah, how to say the oil pump in Indonesia. As well as the Greenpeace, when you're invited by Greenpeace, how to say the oil pump and fire in Indonesia. And it's not how to say, actually, also communicating what you do, what you do on the ground. Because you can lie to whatever you say, but this is our work in Dompas Rio. And then we connect what our work at that village into the whole world, into the world, into to America, US, and others. This is my last presentation. But science and advocacy sometimes have to go hand in hand. Sometimes you're doing science, you're invited by Metro TV and ask them why this company fires there. And sometimes stick with what you have to say. I was invited by BBC, blah, 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 blah. And Harry, what do you think? Sometimes quite difficult to connect, just I stick what to say. This is community-based fire events. And also don't over extrapolate. Some media, some people, politicians push you to do so. There's many magazine, it's what fire, what I study in Sumatra, but they want to extrapolate to the whole Indonesia. Be simple, because people will not understand you. You are very complex, critical is important, but constructive, particularly in developing countries. And finally, be happy. Science is not everything. If the politicians do not hear you, it's okay, because science is not everything. It's a business, politician, lobby, and others. So thank you.
Great. Great. Thank you so much, Prof. Harry, for sharing your very interesting experiences from working on journal articles and translate that into communication spaces that are more digestible. Thank you. So aside from advocacy, the next aspect of science is really that it's usually linked with innovation. In our next speaker, we'll talk about the science and innovation specifically in the forestry sector. I'd like to welcome Paul Burgers, the founder of the social enterprise CO2 Operate BV. Paul, over to you. Paul, you're still muted.
Yeah. Now I am, right? Yeah, good morning, everyone, and good afternoon for everyone in Indonesia. Yeah, I've been listening to the presentations, very interesting. I was looking at Pa Ayen's speech in the beginning. I really enjoyed his modeling and climate change predictions. Also Pa Oki, how they are working with conservation work and climate change, which is all very interesting and very crucial. But yeah, since I am from a scientific background, it's the reason, one of the reasons why I moved to the private sector to do something in the field for the local people. It's because the science quite often doesn't go down to the local level. We experience it in our project in 2008, 2009, when there was an El Nino effect, and I could see on the graph from Pa Ayen that was really low rainfall. Indeed, all our trees died, at least 75% of the trees died in that year. And then when I look at all this good science, Pa Harry already mentioned in his slide, it's quite a, science is about general truth. But if you work in the field, you have no connection with general truth. So my point would be really to try to make the science more practical and make it more, connected to the field level, because we are now really looking every year at all the science that is done in Indonesia about climate change to see, can we predict our planting season? Can we more or less see when the best time is to plant the trees? And even the farmers, when they are planting rice, they don't know exactly when they should plant the rice, because sometimes a rain is coming and think, oh, it's a good rain, we start planting, but then 3 weeks nothing. And I think science could do a very good job in predicting at least a little bit for a few months, at least for people who are actually working in the field can make a well-informed decision about when or not to plant. Because if you do it in this climate change area in the wrong time, you will lose everything. And that's what we have already experienced with our trees. Also, our farmers who are planting irrigated rice because they don't know what climate change is bringing for the rainy season. And I can see all the science is already being done on all these predictions, and it would be good if these institutions would be, yeah, if we can make some changes in the institutions to make it much more specific and not general. And maybe even I was thinking when we discuss with farmers, they're talking about maybe a TV program where they can have updated knowledge on what is coming or what they can expect, or very practical things that they can use when they go out and try to plant their crops. So that would be something that we experience. And that would also be something very important for us, because we don't have any grants, so we cannot write a report after a grant and say it failed because of this. We get investment money from the private sector, from banks, so we just have to be sure that it will succeed. We have no reason for saying it's not working. They will not accept it. So science could help us a lot by making more informed decisions about what to do and when to do what. So that's maybe for now my contribution. Or do I still have some time? No.
I think you still have 1 minute if you want to make
Still
more
have 1
points.
minute. Okay. Let me think of something.
It's okay if you don't.
No, it's fine. So that's what I wanted to say, that okay, I can see this very good science is being done in Indonesia, but how to translate it to something practical that people can use in the rural areas. That's okay.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Paul. An important point from Paul, really, to make science more practical, connect that with the field level, and how science can inform companies' decisions. Okay, so we've heard about advocacy and innovation, and finally, we'll come down to communicating science to the public. And we have here with us, I'd like to first invite Hans Nicholas Jong, an environmental journalist and writer staff for Mongo Bay. Hans, you have 5 minutes, same as everybody else. Over to you.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you okay.
Okay, thank you, Mbak Dinar, for the opportunity. So I'm going to talk about how to communicate science to the public from journalist perspective. There's a few points that I would like to make. First is that I noticed that there's been this growing appetite for science and science-based journalism during this pandemic. I see that more and more people are seeking comments from experts, from scientists, because they're trying to make sense of what's happening in this world. So basically people are trying to survive. So they're seeking comments from people who really know what they're talking about. So I think this is a great opportunity for scientists to play a bigger role when it comes to climate change and the environmental sector. I think we can tap into this growing appetite to increase the role that scientists play and also journalists play in communicating about climate change to the audience. And also, even before the pandemic hits, I noticed that there's been a growing number of media outlets that has been, emphasizing on the usage of data and science in their reporting. For example, outlets like Kata Data and the conservation. So I think this is a really hopeful trend. And I see this as something that will go on, that will develop more into the future as time goes on. And second, if we're talking about how journalists can play a bigger role in communicating about science, I think if I have to suggest, I have to make a suggestion. I think the way the newsroom at the moment works is that we have like a economic reporter only reporting on economic issues. We have environmental reporter only writing about climate change. I think that needs to be to be get rid of, because I think that somehow will fuel, the notion that there's a dichotomy between, weakened economy and climate change. You cannot tackle climate change while growing the economy at the same time. So I think science can definitely fill that gap. It can bridge the dichotomy within the newsroom. So like ideally, economic reporter will write something about the economy, while at the same time, it also puts into context in terms of climate change. So I think if I have to make a suggestion, then that would be it. Yeah, I think I'm gonna leave it at that, so that we have more time for Q&A. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Hans, for very, very important points. I'd like to move on next to Mas Ikhwan. Mas Ikhwan is a journalist from the Harian Kompas, as well as a member from the Society of the Indonesian Environmental Journalists. Mas Ikhwan, over to you.
Okay. Good morning, Netherlands. Good afternoon, Jakarta, Indonesia. Thank you, Dinar, for letting me in. Before I start my response, I would like to honor my lecturer, my Prof. Oki. He is my lecturer when I studied at Diponegoro University.
Thank you.
Okay. I think all is clear by Hans, but I want to talk more basics as media. We have as media, we have a basic function that is to provide information to public. In carrying out the function, media need accurate information and facts to deliver this information and facts, especially on environmental issues. Of course, one big important thing is data and key person to explain the data and the issues. And this data, especially scientific data, is one of the main things needed to be processed into news source and materials. The main use of data since 10 years ago has made a new term of journalism, data-driven journalism or data journalism. 3 days ago, I participated in virtual science in the Newsroom Global Summit, SCN. This is organized by OneIFRA, Association of News Publishers in the World. It also discussed the topic of how data can be used to provide information to the public during the COVID-19 pandemic. The data is used to report the latest COVID-19 information, the background of the COVID-19, why this has happened, and then to predict the future of pandemics and other emerging zoonotic diseases. Related the topic of our webinar today, forest fire in Indonesia give us a massive impact because of the smoke, especially for Kalimantan and Sumatra people. If we remember what happened in 2015, it is I think it is a very valuable experiences for Indonesia. And this year's when we are facing the SARS-CoV-2 that attack human respiratory system, we also facing forest fire that also making us difficult to create. Karina mentioned this both incident as a double crisis, but I prefer mention it is a deadly duet or duet mouth. Harian Kompas published several articles related to this deadly duet to raising awareness the responsible authority and peoples. And yeah, thanks God, our concern did not happen because of the La Nina. One more I want to say that the importance of media in pandemic situation is that people need a credible information. News from mainstream media can be used as reference to provide valid information to people, to during this pandemic are also suffering from virus epidemic of fake news or hoax. So the data is needed by media from a competent and credible source. In addition, the data will be perfect if it is explained with a strong argument from experts in the field. Either
Mas
the
Ikhwan, you
owner
have
of
1 minute left.
okay, thank you. Either the owner of or the researcher of the data or other experts who can provide an overview or a view the data. This data from credible source and qualified source can help the media to build public trust. In addition, it also requires the expertise and ability of the media to communicate the complex and scientific matters to the public in order to understand, to make them understand well. For the end of this opportunity, I would like to call all of us as a researcher, as a lecturer, or any other scientific background professional to collaborate with media. Okay, Dinar, thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Mas Ikhwan. Definitely understand your points and also Hans' points on the need to highlight the collaborative role of scientists and the journalists to better communicate about science and climate change to the public, especially on the use of credible data and references. Okay, so thank you so much for the speakers as well as our discussants. We are now entering, since we have 10 minutes left, we're entering the Q&A session now. And let me look at my cheat sheet for the questions. Okay, so we have a question. Okay, the question is how to deal with climate change critical political leaders, and this question is addressed to Prof. Charlie, Karina, and also Pak Oki. I'm not sure I understand the question clearly though. Perhaps someone in the Zoom section who asked this question can clarify or maybe can speak, and then
maybe
Charlie.
May I, Dinar?
Sure, sure. Go ahead.
I just summarized this question a little bit, and
Go ahead.
but I think that the idea is that of the question that the challenge is not just to preach to the converted and to provide them with information, but also how do you deal with a high-level politician who is not very susceptible and is maybe against this whole idea. So how do you does that need for a different strategy of communication?
Great. So either Karina, Prof. Charlie, and Prof. Oki, either one of you can start answering the question. That'd be great. So maybe Karina, you can start first.
Yes. I didn't want to be rude. Yes, what I would like to say about this is that I think it's very challenging to convince global leaders to tackle this issue of solving a very local problem. At the same time, I think that big companies, multinationals, play a big role. They have a big, how do you say that, supply base with large-scale local plantations that are also the cause of this. So I think it's much more important as for global leaders to, how do you say that? To convince multinationals to change their practices, to really confirm to certain sustainability standards, etc., so that the use of fire becomes less. And I think it's a very challenging aspect, and I don't have a specific solution for this. Anyone else would like to add?
Yes, thank you. I think from my perspective, especially from Indonesian Institute of Sciences, our role is to maximally to provide input to the policy making processes, and not only policy making, but I would say that as scientists, actually, we have the obligation to do what we call it scientific intervention For example, in terms of the conflict of use of particular area. For example, in North Sumatra, in the use of, sorry, repeat a bit out of the topic, but the conflict about the use of the lake for aquaculture then become severe. Then finally, we have some scientific evidence that can make a correction, intervention for the particular policy that has been already produced by policymaker. So this kind of activity in the near future, especially in Indonesia, should be more and more scientific based. So in the last meeting with the Ministry of Maritime and Investment, we came up with the idea that not only in the process of policy making, but also how we can intervene uh, in the intervention to make some correction regarding our policy. And in the case of a local problem, as I mentioned in my presentation, one of our portfolio within the ministry is to produce appropriate technology or policy that really address or accommodate the local problem, and consider as part of effort to downstream or commercialize our research results through community empowerment. That's one thing that I want to also raise. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Oki. Finally, Prof. Charlie, do you want to come in and make some points here?
Oh, yes, thank you. I think I also agree and then support what the Prof. Oki already mentioned about how to make scientific intervention to the policy making, especially in the local and lower level government, because most of problems dealing with climate change and forest conservation, and also dealing with indigenous people and local communities issue is actually faced in local government. For example, in Papua or West Papua, we using most of scientific research, and then develop policy making from the lower level of government. So this also improve the governance as a whole, but also we try to find a really good solution to solve the problem. And also we try to create some innovation that actually it's like a local innovation, but also will be impact in the national or global scale, like conservation province. This is actually really good innovation in West Papua, but it's already recognized by global community. And then our governor, he got award as a global conservation hero last year in US, because we already commit with to conserve 70% of our forests, because when forest is still conserved, it means that we could contribute to reduce our emission, and then also that's try to help other people in other part of the world. So that's why that also very local content, but this will be impact for the global community as a whole. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Prof. Charlie, Prof. Oki, and also Karina for responding to the question. And since we're running out of time here, we don't have time, unfortunately, to respond to more questions. But thank you so much to our speakers and discussants and participants for throwing questions. I would like to finally invite Siko from the KNAW. I'm not sure how to pronounce that in Dutch. So Siko, please, I'll let you have the floor now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dinar. Yeah, I've been listening to all of you with great interest. Thank you very much for your contributions. And I think there is plenty of positive messages from this talk show. And for that, I'm really grateful because it's so easy to get a little defensive or negative. I even saw in the chat that somebody is afraid that humankind will go extinct. In the end, we will. That's the way of the universe. But let's not help it along too quickly. But this idea of Pak Oki of scientific intervention, I really like that because it tells of the responsibility we have as scientists and journalists and activists to bring this message and to speak truth. And I also really like what Pak Heri was saying, that good science will speak for itself. And I think what he's also saying to us is that good science also listens to which questions are out there, whether it is by politicians that we need to co-create policy together with, or if it is what Pak Paul was saying, if it's just small farmers that need a practical tool. So if we listen and we use our good science, we can co-create, we can communicate, and by those means we can make a difference. So that's the positive message that I'm wanting to take from this, because I want to be hopeful, I want to be active, and I hope all of you will take a little bit of that positivity with you as well into the next session that will start in 4 minutes. So I would like to invite, on behalf of the organization of Winner, all of you to join that in a few minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Siko, for wrapping up. I have a message from the committee here. We're going to ask the audience to turn on the camera so that we can have a very quick photo session. Thank you. So if you can do that now, that would be great, since we only have 3 minutes to the next session. Thank you. So if all of you can turn on your video, so we can all take a photo session. Can someone let me know if the photo has been taken? Thank you. Maybe Riri.
Hi, Mbak Dinar. This is Emi, the host of the session. I've seen that some of the people have already turned on the video, so I will start to capture the photo. I'll let you know. All right. Be prepared. On a count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's one. And then another one. 1, 2, smile. Okay. Last one. Okay. 1, 2, say cheese or cuss. All right, perfect. I get it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. So since Siko has provided closing and wrap up, I'd like to thank everyone once again for participating in this session. We hope the discussion has been useful for you, and we'll wait for you in the next session in 2 minutes. Good afternoon and have a good day. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Salam kakak Prof Charlie.
Oh, salam Ade
Salam kakak
hormat.
Prof Charlie. Diberi kakak.
Oh, salam Ade hormat.
Selalu sehat. Diberi kakak.
Iya, salam sehat.
Selalu sehat.
Salam sehat. Amin selalu.